Hello and welcome to the first Manufacturing Leaders podcast of 2023, and I'm delighted to welcome Russell Richardson. So Russell is someone who I've wanted to get on this podcast for quite some time. He's a senior leader within North East and has worked for giants of the industry through his career like Caterpillar and Komatsu. I absolutely loved this podcast. We went through the journey right from 1988 when he was an Apprentice Fabricator right to more recent times as an operations director. This is another reason and a key reason why a year ago I started this podcast, to learn from people like Russell and how they've gone through the journey and how they've managed people through that time. It's felt like a real privilege, if I'm honest with you, to spend this time with Russell and to learn so much from him. And you're going to learn a lot. In particular, how you manage people to success, but in the main for me, how he manages his mindset, and every single experience, being either good or bad, he has taken into a positive light and made that better his career and better opportunities got off the back of it. An unbelievable outset of life, which you're going to really learn a lot from. So please enjoy this episode. Please feel free to like, subscribe to any of the channels. And again, if you are any guests you think could be good for the Manufacturing Leaders podcast, please feel free to tag them here as well. Thank you very much and enjoy.
So excellent. Russell, thank you very much for joining me on here today. If you wouldn't mind just give me a quick sort of introduction, please, buddy, that would be superb.
Yeah, so obviously my name's Russell Richardson. I've been, my career so far has been 34 years in the making. Started off as an apprentice fabricator back in the day and worked my way through lots of different levels of supervisory management into more senior roles more later on in my career. I live in the northeast of England. I've been brought up as a proper northeast lad. You know, all my hobbies are typical old-fashioned hobbies, which I was brought up, you know, with me dad and my two brothers doing typical northeast hobbies like growing lakes, going fishing, flying pigeons and racing greyhounds, you know, that type of background. So a proper old-fashioned mining background, you know.
Yeah, good man. And I'll be really looking forward to this one, Russell, because it's the first one I've done for the new year, so happy new year. But obviously we've been working with you and you've been a pleasure to work with, and you know, one of those people that I know people will learn a lot from, which is great. So we'll dig around the journey. But first question to you, obviously you've been a leader for a while now. What does it mean to you to be a leader, would you say?
Well, I think I could honestly say in all the roles I've had, the leadership ones have been the best for me for lots of different reasons. But a privilege, I would say, Mark, would be the first word that springs to mind. Leading a team of people, helping grow that team. You know, a lot of accountability and responsibility comes with that, but something that I really relish. You know, the best, most enjoyable parts of the job for me are developing teams and getting stuck into some meaty projects, you know. So pride, humility, integrity are all words I would use to describe true leadership, you know, and something that, again, is a privilege to be, you know, to have that role.
Yeah, and that's a great word, that too, isn't it? Because you're right, it absolutely is a privilege. It's stressful, it's hard, it's rewarding, it's everything, but it is an absolute privilege and such a responsibility, isn't it, to try and people around you. So I love that. Look, you've obviously had an excellent career. You've managed it for a long time, and you've obviously been at companies for a long time. You're very, very loyal. So let's take it right back then. Obviously, you mentioned the Northeast roots and always been that way. Apprentice initially. I mean, was that something you fell into? Was that sort of the path for you, or what?
Yeah, fell into it was really the right word, actually, Mark. I don't know if it still goes on now, but in my time when I came into the final year of school, we had a careers teacher that came in, and you had basically a chat with them and described what you would like to do and stuff like that. And I remember she said, "What would you like to do, you know, when you leave school?" And I says, "Well, I'd love to be a policeman, or I would love to be in the RAF. That's what I honestly wanted to do." And she was like, "Okay, have you thought about an engineering career?" And I was like, well, not really. And I got 2 application forms to fill in, and I got a job offer at Arctic Limited, which then became Caterpillar.
Yeah.
And a one for Nissan as well at the same time. And I chose the Arctic's one quite simply because it was on my doorstep. I didn't have a car. And it seemed like a good company at the time. It was privately owned at the time, you know. So that was that. So I fell into that, almost got my apprenticeship. And I had a fantastic apprenticeship, actually. You know, we did a year at the EITB in Billingham, where you learned a broad-based skill of all sorts, you know, fabrication, welding, electronics, IT, all of the different things, you know. So I had a great apprenticeship, you know, and I've seen a lot. I've been involved with a lot of apprenticeships since then as well. You know, being a mentor to apprentices over many years, and also in the recruitment of apprentices as well. You know.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Was obviously fabrication? It's a real hands-on role. Was that? Have you got sort of family members? Was there any subconscious influence there, do you think, that led you to that? Because obviously RAF Forces fabrication, big difference, isn't it?
Not really. I mean, my dad was an electrician by trade.
Okay,
And my grandparents were either worked in the mines or worked in the military, you know. So I think my uncle was a plater by trade. Who worked at Coles Cranes on the weir, you know, back in the day. But other than that, I was probably the first one, you know.
Yeah, it's can be associated with people who graft. Back in the day, do you know what I mean? Did you class yourself as a grafter? Was that something you always had in you? Would you say?
I started work really, Mark. I mean, officially, I started work when I left school. You know, I had 6 weeks off, and then I went in my apprenticeship. But I had a paper round when I was 12. I was picking tatties and delivering milk when I was 13, and then I got a job at Easington Dog Track. You know, a lot of people won't understand that because it's not there anymore. It's a housing estate, but there used to be a greyhound racing track at Easington Village. And I had the role of pulling the ball hair around the track, which the dogs used to chase, and then putting the dogs in the traps, you know. So I was working there from 14 to 16, working a Tuesday night, Thursday night, Saturday night, and a Sunday morning. So I grafted from an early age. A grafter on the shop floor. I mean, I worked shifts. I worked with guys, you know, and I think what I would say is about being an apprentice, you're sort of like, you're almost like in a little bit of a bubble. Yeah. Because you know, you're an apprentice. We had to wear orange overalls, you know, so we stood out amongst the rest of the lads on the shop floor. And back then, you know, in the late 80s, it could be quite an intimidating place. You know, there was some great people. But there was also people who, I guess you would call the word bullying now, but back in the day it was just the norm. It was accepted, you know. But there was a fair bit of ridiculing and stunts being played to the young apprentices, you know. But all healthy stuff, really, from an experience point of view, and something I've tried to encourage young apprentices when they, you know. Some of the apprentices you have today, Mark, they're so intelligent and they're coming in to do a manufacturing role. And before you know where you're at, they're wanting to progress into better and bigger roles, you know. And my advice to them is always, you know, if you want to be a leader of the future, you need to get exposure outside of your apprenticeship, you know, to experience that time outside of the bubble, you know, and learn, you know, some of the highs and lows of that journey, you know, because you cannot get that experience from a textbook or going to college. You know, you've got to have exposure to it, and that sometimes can become a gap for people if they haven't had that exposure, if that's that route they want to follow, you know, in manufacturing leadership.
Which is the debate, isn't it? And I think, I mean, I ask this every time, and most people, a bit of a mix, I would say, but I think not the best leaders, because that's controversial, but there's so many good leaders that have come through the route of shop floor and apprentice. And I think for me, speaking of people who are maybe on the shop floor or the mid-ground, they give respect probably easier to people who've walked in their, been in their shoes and had those same pressures, rather than someone who's perhaps gone to university and done that route. It's a different route, isn't it? And there's pros and cons to it. But I'd probably say that the general consensus is it's probably easier to get respect if you have done what they've done, and you're not going to ask them something you wouldn't do yourself to some extent.
I mean, it is, and I think the ideal world, Mark, would be get the balance of both, and but youngsters today are getting an apprenticeship can do that. They're gonna serve the time having an apprenticeship. At the same time, they'll be doing college and university stuff, which can go way beyond the apprenticeship. So the balance of both is perfect.
Yeah.
Again, the guidance I would give to somebody who wants to progress very quickly is, just to take your time. And I know they like dead enthusiastic and they want to progress because they see it as some low-hanging fruit, more money and so on and so forth. But if they want to become a leader later, having that exposure to them people at that time, there's no substitute for it, really, Mark. You can't get that. You cannot pick it up at college and learn it in a textbook. You've got to experience in it. So if that's the role, I would suggest that would be the route I would recommend. You
know what, I pick up on two things as well, which is, I might come across like a bit of a dinosaur here, and it's a bit controversial, but two things you mentioned there, which I think are the reason why we've still got challenges with skill shortages, and maybe not the skill being at the level it probably once was. One thing is that I think a lot of people, if someone asks me what my best experience was, I say when I was working at 12 years old washing pots, because I learned about hard work and graft, and it was embedded into me. So I think if you have the experience working when you're really young, it's the best. And it's probably rare now. People don't work probably until they're 16 and whatnot, and they probably get handouts from parents more than they ever used to. I think it's a massive part of it. And also, I've got to be careful what I say, but I think cultures have changed. And I think my first job was so hard, and we got shouted at, and it was disciplined, and it was tough, but it was brilliant. And do you know what I mean? Actually, I learned so much there that I think sometimes we are maybe too careful in cultures now, that we wrap people up, and we're not getting used to because life's tough. Do you know what I mean? It's hard, isn't it? It really is.
100%, Mark. 100%. And I spent most of my career at Caterpillar. Fantastic organisation, and I developed lots of leaders. And they've gone on to do some great stuff beyond that. And again, I saw that as a privilege. But some of the things, in the early days, you have to hold the hands a bit, and teach them and coach them and mentor them. But at some point, you've got to let them go and find their own feet. And more often than not, they get exposure to some of the laws. And in manufacturing, you've got everything, haven't you? From people issues, quality, velocity, the cost thing is always hanging over everybody. But unless they get that exposure on their own, they're not going to develop, and the sooner they get that exposure, the better they become, and I've seen it in all my career, and I could give you countless examples of where it's been a successful one. And sometimes, you've got to pick the pieces up with them and explain, that this, you have to get exposure to learn, and you've got to self-reflect and what could I have done differently there? The outcome could have been better and stuff like that. But it's all great stuff in the development of the future leaders. So I 100% agree with what you said.
Obviously, you were at CAT for 30 plus years, you know what I mean, which is an unbelievably stint. Was that always a plan? Was there a clear progression route for you there, or is it just the way it happened?
No, I think I did my apprenticeship. I'll just go back a little bit in time, Mark, just to give you some context.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people's asked me this question, and you said earlier, did you fall into the role? And I did. And then beyond that, when I was an apprentice, so I started my apprenticeship in August '88. I was made redundant in September '92.
Yep.
So just out my time, I was made redundant. There was a big sort of recession worldwide going on. And at that point, it was a huge shock to me because I hadn't been out of a job. You know, I'd worked at the dog track prior to that, so I'd always had an income. I had my apprenticeship, and I was made redundant, myself and 12 others, you know. And I think there was 4 of us at the time, apprentices. And of course, every role we went for as a fabricator, welder, they were asking for 3 to 5 years of experience. And I'm thinking, well, my 4 years apprenticeships count. No, didn't. It didn't count. So I couldn't get a job. I mean, there wasn't many jobs going about, but I couldn't get a job. So I ended up buying a bloody hot dog van. And that was another life experience, you know. You know, I bought this old van and done it all up and painted it. And I went and sold hot dogs and chips and God knows what. And again, some quite frightening experiences late on a night, you know, people coming out the pubs. So that was another life experience. And I got called to go back to Caterpillar to cover sick leave. So this was like, I thought I'd won the lottery, you know, and I thought, great, you know, go back. Big shock to my system. So I'm just going to get my head down and crack on, you know. So I did that. And fortunately, I got a permanent contract. And then a couple of years after that, I think now I would probably be about 23, 24. I was working on the front chassis line in the fabrication shop, making the chassis. And the role of the charge hand came up, which, you know, I guess now is the equivalent of team lead.
Yeah, young age.
And it came up on the line, and nobody had any interest at all. And I was sat there and I'm thinking, you know, this could be a great step for me. And so I put my hat in the ring for it, you know, and I got offered the role, which I was over the moon. But the majority of the people on that line had been their apprentice. So it was quite tough, especially when you had to have some of the difficult conversations, you know. So it wasn't because I was the most talented individual or anything like that. It was because nobody else wanted the job. And I thought, I'll have a go at that. And it was quite tough at the time. There was a fair bit of Mickey taking and ridiculing and all sorts of stuff I had to overcome. But looking back, I think it was probably a really good development for me as an individual, and you know, the start of my career. So that was the beginning. I then got moved on to become a section manager of a different area in various different areas. And then I remember a manager who I used to work for, he lives in Australia now, and he said to me, he says, you know, Russell, he says, within Caterpillar, he says, the door to progression is going through the Six Sigma black belt route. He says, that's the way you'll progress in the business. And to be quite honest with you, Mark, I didn't fancy that at the time, you know. I thought, God, you know, you'll have to be somebody with really high intellect and so on to do that type of role, you know, as typically the people who were black belts were quite high up in the organization at the time. Anyway, another boss of mine, he came and asked me to join the team, the Caterpillar production team, which basically was the Toyota production system, but Caterpillarized. And he asked me to join the team. And I accepted and went and did the training. I remember talking to my dad at the time, who was like my mentor. And he said, you know, these chances don't come around too often. You know, you'll regret it for the rest of your life if you don't take it. As tough as it might be. And I remember doing the training in Northern Ireland, and it was 4 weeks. My son had just been born. It was really tough leaving him, you know, going away on a Sunday afternoon, coming back on a Friday night. But I did it. It was, I found it kind of tough, but again, the experience was fantastic. So I think at that point, my career was mapped out once I become the black belt, you know, and then went on to do the lean black belt stuff. And then after 4 years, after doing a fantastic variety of different projects at all different levels, which is an experience I don't think you can replicate, you know, without actually doing it. It was fantastic. Probably the highlight of my career, I would say. And then I was put back into the organisation as an operations group manager,
Yeah.
And then I just got more exposure. I got more responsibility. I had more people. I had more buildings, So it was a fantastic, fantastic career at Caterpillar. 31 years.
It's unbelievable, and I guess it proves, Russell, as well, that a lot of people wouldn't have taken that opportunity, because in terms of new parents, lots to do at the time. A lot of people have gone, I'll wait the next one, and not to say it wouldn't come with that. You might not have been on that trajectory to where you were. So it's sometimes it just proves, isn't it? Sometimes we've got to do what doesn't necessarily feel comfortable at the time, or it might not be the right timing, isn't it?
100%, Mark. And I can remember sitting in that class of black belts over in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of colleagues from Peterlee went over with me, and sitting in front of these master black belts who were doing the training, which is like canny tough, and looking around the classroom to all the other people in the class. I think there was about 40 candidates there, and obviously everybody's doing the black belt, and they're from all over the world, all over the Caterpillar world. Some of them were presidents, vice presidents, managing directors, people of vast experience and, qualifications coming out the ears. And I was sat there as like, the manufacturing person, and I felt quite uncomfortable, to be honest with you, at the start of it all. But like anything else, you do your first week. You've got an exam to sit on the Friday morning, where they ask you to do teach back. So this is like, pick a subject you've learned in the week that you've really struggled to get to grips with.
Yeah.
Learn it for 10 minutes and then teach it back to the rest of the group.
That's why I do it. Yeah.
Which was quite daunting in itself, But I guess looking back, and you can only connect the dots looking back, really. That was probably really challenging at the time, but probably really good development.
Yeah.
And you've got to grasp that nettle and take them chances as they come, like.
100%. What I'd love to ask you as well, which is taking a little bit back again, you mentioned in terms of your first ever management role, which was, you were managing people who I guess had been managing you to some extent, and had been more senior. I think it'd be good advice, and I'd love to ask you advice on this, because a lot of people find themselves in situations, whether it's a brand new team or whether it's probably more often, they are suddenly managing people who were the colleagues before. And that, that's a difficult transition in terms of just not being their pal anymore and being a manager, and probably, like you say, dealing with what comes with that. What advice would you give to someone who is suddenly in that position, I guess, is going through that, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. It sort of comes with experience in time, but and I've had many conversations with young, leaders starting out. Various assessment centres we did at Caterpillar for team leads, apprentices, section managers, and other roles. All fantastic experience, which led to different mentoring and coaching conversations I've had with them outside on that very topic.
Yeah.
And I think, first of all, you need like that inside out approach. You need to convince yourself first that this is the route I want to go. And if that's the route I want to go, I've got to, people call it which side of the fence are you sitting on. I'm not sure if that terminology is still sort of valid in today's world, but, if that's the route you've got to, you want to do for your career, there's some difficult decisions you've got to make along there, and there's some difficult discussions you're going to have with your former pals. And the advice I would give would be sort of around, some of them conversations are going to be difficult because you're going to be telling somebody probably for the first time what they're not wanting to hear. The only advice I would give is like, be humanistic about it.
Yeah.
Be nice. You're gonna tell your pal of 10 years that he's doing something wrong. So you're sort of like on hallowed ground a bit. You've just got to be careful with that. Get your point over without a doubt, because you have to. The common denominator of success is like the effective leaders do and say the things the mediocre leaders are not prepared to do. So, and it's a tough step for everyone, the first time you do that. But it's the best advice I would give for anybody. And I could give you 100 examples, Mark, of where I've given what is perceived at the time as like sort of not so good news, bad news to somebody. But later, they've gone away and they're licking the wounds and they come back. And later they've realised that, the reason I was doing that was part of their development. And they could see that 100% every time that's happened, people have fed back that to me later. And it might take 2 days, it might take 2 months. But without doubt, they've come back and made that comment to me,
Yeah, that's great advice. I love that. And you mentioned, obviously, when you made that move, your dad was an influence. I mean, has he been one of the biggest sort of outside work influences on your career, would you say?
I think so. I mean, my dad passed away in 2008, and I was sort of partway through my journey as a black belt, and he was the one who convinced us to go for it, So,
yeah,
from being a small child until he left us, he was a huge influence in my life. My dad was kind of direct.
Yeah.
He never wanted to be a chief. He was always happy being an Indian.
Yeah.
But he wasn't afraid of giving feedback, good, bad, or indifferent to anyone, And he's quite a big fella, and I guess to most people he's might have came over as quite dominating, but he learned me and my 2 brothers from an early age what real life was all about. I mean, we had a great upbringing. He took us. We were down the Dean, down the beach, fishing, crabbing. We had greyhounds. We had pigeons. We had allotments. It was a proper typical northeast background, and it was kind of tough. I mean, we never had any money.
Yeah.
My dad worked, my mum never, and there was 3 of us at home, so we didn't have loads of money. And I remember my dad saying to us later on in life, he was working at Coles Cranes at the time as an electrician, and he was also working on a night when he came in from work at his team, go out and work on the taxis. And years later, he said to us, "Don't do what I've done." He says, "I did that so you had more Christmas boxes to open up on a Christmas morning." And he says, "I can tell you now, it wasn't worth it." He says, "Because I've missed a lot of yous growing up in that period of time." So he was one of them who was very compassionate, but also very realistic about the world, and huge miss to our family, me and my brothers and the rest of the family, because he was the first port of call for any advice, whether it be, what was going on at work or, what was going on in your life. Like, so, yeah, definitely the biggest influence outside of work.
And I can really resonate with that. I mean, I lost my dad a couple of years ago, and very, very, very similar man by sounds of it. Do you know what I mean? Just everything described was my dad was, and he was the go-to for me. But I've kind of found since he's not been there, he's almost been a bigger influence, because all the things that led up to that before that, I didn't take for granted, but I think it's after they've gone, you can't take them. You really think about all the lessons you learned, don't you? And then you live through them. And that's what I found, I would say.
100%. I mean, me and my brother, my brother's older than me, and quite often, I mean, we spend a canny bit of time together, socialising, and we've both got an allotment and stuff like that. And we often hear ourselves say things that my dad said, and we'll laugh about it, And to be honest with you, you're exactly right, Mark. Yeah, the good advice that you get when you're younger, I think it's sort of, you listen to it, but it doesn't necessarily go in somewhere. Until you're at a certain age and you think, you know what, my dad said that and he was right.
yeah, exactly that. No, I love that. And obviously you will have been managed by a lot of people throughout your career as well. Do you think you've been influenced by the managers you've had, either right or wrong? And would you say there's anyone in particular that's specifically influenced the way you are as a manager, would you say?
Oh, I've been canny fortunate, I think. Yeah. When I reflect on my career, Mark, I've worked for some really good managers. I've worked for some really old-fashioned managers.
Yep.
Some managers who like to bang the table, and I don't think I would say there's any one in particular, but I would like to think that I've learned from them all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of the things that it's like when you go on a training course, isn't it? You know, or a Six Sigma black belt course. You know, there's certain things that resonate with you that you know that you're going to use in the future because it feels right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same with different managers and leaders. You know, there's the bits that you think, wow, that was great. I mean, I remember an American guy coming into Caterpillar when it wasn't performing very well back in 2006 and 7, and he came in and he was inspirational to everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, he had the workforce out on strike, which you could think, wow, that's not good news, but it actually was.
Yeah.
He came in and he had a mission to do and he executed it, and it was painful at the time, but later the respect he got from the changes he made, positive changes, and turned the company around to the successful giant it is today, he was absolutely pivotal to that transformation. So he inspired me because he had such a simplistic approach. He was direct, he was open and honest, he didn't beat about the bush, but at the same time, he had a really nice way with people.
Yeah.
He listened to people, which is one of the biggest qualities I would say is missing in a lot of organizations. You know, people get too caught up in the red tape and the email and the meetings and the metrics that don't matter. And, you know, it deadens creativity. You know, people lose the will to live.
Yeah.
And I've wore that T-shirt a couple of times, you know, and it's, I mean, it's just, you know, we need to unleash people's potential. You know, it's all there. And if we can tap into that and you know, be good human beings to each other and get the most out of people, that's the key to it for me, Mark, you know.
100%. It's I think the best organizations are the ones that take the ideas from everyone, from shop floor right up to head of ops. It's
100%.
You know what I mean? It's the organization I see which will make a big difference is the people I want to work for. It's one of those, I think, one of the reasons why people leave is because they're not heard, they haven't got a voice, and they want to work for a company where they can have an impact. Doesn't matter what the role is.
100%. I mean, I've seen like actual real life evidence in my whole career about, you know, the different styles of management and the different approaches, and I can 100% put my hand on my heart and say that the development investment approach is definitely the way forward. You know, if we, you know, in today's world, Mark, we want more from people, don't we? We want more for less.
Yeah.
You know, once over, you would come to work, you'd clock in, you would do your bit, you'd clock out, and you'd go home and end.
Yeah.
Now we want so much more.
Yeah.
We want people to contribute to health and safety ideas, continuous improvement, be part of the lean journey, do surveys, you know, all of these extra things we want people to do. And some people love that. Some people are horrified by it, you know. So for me, the approach that is still happens in some organizations, the carrot and stick approach works, but it only works to a point, you know.
Yeah.
For me, that investment of the whole person is where you're going to get that manufacturing advantage, you know, building an ethos of continuous improvement, a positive health and safety culture where they're going to look out for each other, you know, a lean culture where people's constantly looking for new ideas. And we will only get this if we invest the time in people, in engagement, and stop looking for things that's going wrong and start to encourage people to look for things that's right. Now, you know, it's easy said. You know, I've worked in several organizations where there's barriers to overcome, but it's that collaboration that you've got to get with everybody across, you know, and move away from this silo mentality of work and just be nice to people, you know, be good human beings. I mean, you hear about it on the media and the news all the time, don't you, about mental health and stuff like that. And it's you know, it's always been there. It's just recognised more today the damage that it can do to people. And, I've been involved in some proper naughty bullying stuff, which we've had to deal with. And to be honest with you, nobody really wants to deal with that stuff. They just wanted to go away. But, you can't sit there and watch innocent people's lives being ruined, and it happens in the biggest of organisations at all levels. So, these things need to be eradicated, and for me, that's the way to do it, the humanistic approach and embracing change and creating that environment where people can thrive, and unleash the potential to make manufacturing stable in the UK.
100%. No, I love all that. And everything is kind of wrapped up with what you said before about just listening, isn't it? Listening to people.
Oh,
everything
absolutely. There. I'm a big advocate of Dr. Stephen Covey, and I've read a lot of his stuff over the years, and quite often go back to it. And one of the things I've had in every workplace I've had is an Indian talking stick, which is often brought out into one of them meetings where everybody's tense and nobody's listening to each other. And more often than not, when people are listening, they're preparing what they're going to come back with, so they miss the whole point. And the Indian talking stick is one of them, like a bit of a gimmick, Mark, but gets the point across, and the most important communication quality of all is that listening piece, that seeing the world through the eyes of another, and having some empathy, because everybody's going through something, probably at home. You've got the challenges of work and stuff like that, and it's just about being being a good human being, really.
Yeah, completely agree. What was it like? Obviously, you left Capital after so long, and starting to a new organisation. And was that again a bit of a culture shock, I guess, after all that time?
To be honest with you, it was a difficult decision to leave CAT. And I thought, I'm going to leave here and I'm going to have 6 months off. And one of my colleagues had actually gone to Komatsu, and he was in touch pretty much straight away, and asked us to come along. And I was like, I just want to go down the garden for a few months, But he enticed us round, and I went up and I joined the Komatsu team in Sunderland. So, when you talk about Komatsu, I have them in the same bracket as Caterpillar, big yellow goods manufacturer and bulldozers and all this type of good stuff. And of course, the plant in Sunderland was completely not like that. They manufactured rollers for the crushing and screening division. And on the other side of the factory, they made large-scale projects. So it really was a culture shock. I think it was a culture shock in a good way, Mark. Again, it was another life experience where there was lots of things that weren't working very effectively. Poor performing KPIs, the wrong KPIs, a bit of a them and us culture with the shop floor, heavily unionised. I mean, bear in mind, this company previously had been Hugh Woods out of the Team Valley, who would, started life back in the 1906, I think, making products for the National Coal Board. I mean, I remember going to somebody's house with our HR manager, Louise, and we visited this guy's house to give him, in COVID times, to give him his long service award. He'd been there 53 years.
Really?
I mean, it was,
amazing.
So I remember having some of them conversations on the shop floor about, what it was like back in the day and some of the things. And I remember sitting down with the union guys at the time, and some proper good lads, and the external officials of the union as well were great. But the first meeting was, can he sort of arms folded across the table? What do you think you're going to do? Everybody else has failed, type of thing, And it was sort of put the gauntlet down, And I just said to them, I says, look, I ain't going to be banging any tables. I says, just give us some time, We're here to improve things, And it was a fantastic journey. I mean, I've never worked in a shipyard, but I can imagine it being similar to a 1970s shipyard. And that's not being disrespectful, because there was some absolute quality people there. Some great people there. And led us into the transition into SE-TEK, you know. But it was fantastic. But to answer your question, it was absolutely was a culture shock.
Yeah, I bet. And what was, I don't know how much you're able to talk about it, but the transition to SE-TEK. So one of my good friends, Carl Sponsbury, right up then, so he was part of that. So I remember at the time. But what was that like? Was that something you were, when were you aware of that? You know, how did that change things? What was that like dealing with all that?
So it came about. It's certainly a surprise to me. So I joined the Komatsu team, and it was part of a whole transformation of the business, you know.
Yeah.
And we did some great stuff, you know. Got all the KPIs turned around. We got the factory looking good. Building the team was great. There's some great people there who hadn't. What's the word I would use, Mark? They'd been silenced.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They had no voice.
Yeah.
And these people were some of the best people I've ever worked with in my career. And I've worked with some great people. 34 years, you know, I've worked, and some of the best people were there. They were just hidden away, being silenced, you know, didn't have a voice anymore. And they had all of this capability inside of them. And during that transition from Komatsu to SE-TEK, I enabled that to come out, you know, and some of the stuff that was done, even though it finished the way it finished, the team that we had and some of the work that was done was fantastic. So at the very beginning of that, you know, I'd been working there 15 months now. We've got everything sort of on the right track. And I'm thinking, oh, it's looking great. You know, we had some good stuff. And then Komatsu announced that they were putting the business up for sale.
Yeah.
Now, I think probably some people in the business may have known that, but I certainly didn't. You know, so it was a bit of a shock. I guess I was a bit disappointed, really, because we put so much effort into it. But it was like anything else. It was another. So at this point in time, the word of MBO hadn't even been spoken about.
Yep.
So they tried to sell the business. It was quite unique. You know, the manufacturing rollers on one side of the business and these massive project structures on the other side didn't fit. So they had to sell them separately. So they sold the project business to a company called Fairport Engineering, which was just over the road. Just over the road. And then they tried to sell the manufacturing bit, which, you know, we knew by now that we weren't making any money on these rollers. There was such a competitive market. You could buy them in from the Far East and China and places like that. And so the idea of the MBO came about, and I was invited by the general manager of the time to be part of that as operations director. And to be quite honest with you, Mark, I don't think I really knew what I was signing into at the time, you know. And it was there was some risky stuff in there, you know. There was we had to start from scratch, so we couldn't continue selling rollers. We had to go, myself and the other directors, we had to go to Northern Ireland, and we had to sit in front of these teams, these big organisations, you know, the likes of Terex, McCloskey, Telestack, and a few others, and sit down. I mean, bear in mind, we've got no credibility. They see us as a roller manufacturer. And I remember having to sit in front of a team of people in the boardroom explaining to them how I would build a chassis. You know, because that was my trade. I did that, you know. And then, of course, we had to take that back once we got some confidence with them, take it back to the company, sit down with the lads and lasses on the shop floor and describe how we were going to fundamentally change the business. And it was tough. Because as I've described, there was some really skilled people there, but they'd never worked in, you know, like the repeatable sort of manufacturing business, you know, where every chassis had to be the same. You had to follow standard work. We had to have a risk assessment for it and stuff like that. This was all new to the lads and lasses, you know. And I remember, you know, getting my boiler suit on and going on and doing it with them, you know. And, you know, we built a prototype and there was a few issues with it. We built the next prototype. We then had to build a paint plant. And the product at the end of it was absolutely fantastic. But we then, of course, once we'd gotten the confidence of the customers. We were absolutely over the moon, by the way, with the product. We then had to ramp up, and we had so much interest in the product.
Yeah.
They all wanted a bit of it, you know. They were all saying, "Oh, you know, we want your chassis as well, and can you do this?"
Yeah.
So we're trying to manage all of this. Brand new business, ramp ups like this. We had 14 MPI programs, and we were sort of executing them in 3 to 4 weeks. If I was doing one of them back at CAT, I'd have a team of 20 people, and it would take 6 months.
Yeah,
we were, and these prototypes were going on the production line, you know. So it was proper. It was proper hard work. And then, of course, we had the we had COVID, we had Brexit, we had the war in Ukraine. The costs just went spiraling out of control.
Unplanned that as well. I mean, the way that the speed that all happened was crazy, wasn't it?
It was devastating, really, because we had, you know, the market.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to this day, is very competitive. But if you get that right, if you can get, you know, we had a phrase, the race to break even. That was our challenge, and unfortunately, we didn't make it for all of the reasons, you know, I've just described.
Yeah.
And whilst it was kind of sort of at the end, it was disappointing. You know, we had to make people redundant, make myself redundant.
Yeah.
It was an experience that I look back on really positively.
Yeah.
And I say that because it was the people that made that special.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was the people, the team that we developed, the environment we created with everybody.
Yeah.
It was absolutely fantastic, you know. And although it finished the way it did, I wouldn't change anything, you know.
Yeah.
I would change the fact that we went into administration, of course.
Yeah.
But it was a successful business there. If we could have just gotten over that hump, you know, that if we had an investment that we could have used to get to that break-even level and beyond, it would have been fantastic, you know.
Yeah, it's crazy. But no, there were some fantastic people there, and it was a real disappointing. And like you say, all that hard work. But I'm sure the person being you are, you'll take that experience as what it was, as an experience to take on to your next role, your next opportunities, I guess.
100%. And I've spoken to quite a few people about that journey, and they sort of like feel like they're walking on eggshells, and I'm like, no, this was another life experience, you know. Part of your life, you know, that whilst at the end it was a bit disappointing, the people I met in that journey and I keep in touch with today, you know, they'll probably be lifelong friends, you know. And it was a great story, you know.
Yeah, 100%. It is. And you know, your next role where there is an opportunity where, you know, for an MBO, for a sale, not many people have had that experience. Do you know what I mean? Not many people have gone through that. So, you know, that it is a real positive experience to have gone through to take on. No, I'd find. And how have you found the unplanned position you're in terms of, you know what I mean? Because it's stressful being out of work and it's a job in itself. How have you found that sort of, you know, mentality wise dealing with
that? I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, to be honest with you, Mark, it's the first time I've ever like been out of work in all my working career.
Yeah.
You know, if I look back when I was probably you know, delivering papers from 12-year-old, I've always worked.
Yeah.
I feel anxious when I'm not working, but I keep myself busy. You know, I've developed new habits to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, to make sure I go down the garden. You know, as much as the weather's been horrendous, you know, I've got my long johns on. I'm down there and I'm doing something. You know, I've spent loads of time with the family. We've had some nice holidays. We've had Christmas. I've done loads of DIY. I think I've done more shopping than anybody in the world. So I've just been enjoying it, mate, to be honest with you, and getting some soak time on a lot of different things, you know, and thinking about stuff that's gone on and just resetting myself for my next role, you know, and making sure that next role is right for me, you know. I'm 51 now, you know, I'm not planning on retiring anytime soon.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I want to make sure that the next role is right for me. So I've been, involved with some interviews and stuff like that, and there's some of them just not been right.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I've been able to walk away from that, and continue to look until the right one comes along. And I'm a big believer of like it'll happen when the timing's right,
Yeah.
And that's been my approach. Always look forward.
Yeah.
You can only join the dots looking back, can't you?
Yeah.
When you look at a particular experience, you think, bloody hell, how did I not see that coming? It's easy to see afterwards, with the benefit of hindsight. So, I ensure that I don't beat myself up about that too much.
Yeah.
I give myself some flexibility with that, and I look at it positively as another life experience. And I've experienced many highs and lows in all of my career, and every one of them has been a learning point, and I think that's the key, or advice I would give to new leaders would be, whatever happens, try to see the positives,
Yeah.
And take it as a life experience, and something that you're going to be stronger from because of that.
Yeah, love that, and such a good outlook. I think it's fantastic. So I've got some quick fire questions. There's never too quick fire, but we'll see what we get. And I've also got a question from one of my previous guests to ask you as well, which he sent me this morning, which is a good one. So I'll ask you quick fire ones first. What are the 3 things or 3 words you think make up a good leader?
Humility, good character, and resilience.
Nice. Excellent. How do we improve the future of manufacturing? Difficult to do that one short, but have a go.
I honestly believe, Mark, and I think I've already touched on it earlier, the days have gone of where people come to work, they clock in, they do the bit and they go home. We want more as manufacturing teams. We want more. We want more for less, basically. We want people to collaborate. We want them to commit. We want them to do the extra curricular stuff. We want them to be a good employee, follow health and safety guidelines to the letter, involved in teams, be part of a continuous improvement. We want so much more from employees these days than what we've ever done. And I think my honest approach is that investment in time with them people, because I've seen that firsthand so many times, and the return on investment is absolutely fantastic. But it's hard work. It's not, you're not going to get it on a plate. You as a leader need to invest in that. You need to invest in your team, so they invest in their team, and so on. And it's the most difficult route.
Yeah.
But the reward at the end is fantastic. Unleashing people's true capability and creativity. It's unlocking a door, that, people refer to the 7 wastes, in lean, and, at Caterpillar, we had the 8th waste, and the most important one of all was the unused creativity and capability in people. And you only get that through investment in time, coaching, mentoring, teaching them, being a change advocate, tell them why it's important to change. It's not natural to everybody, and it's natural to sort of what's the word to resist.
Mm-hmm.
It's natural for people to resist because it's something. I'm not. Let's invest the time and tell them why it's important. And communication is so important as well. It's a 2-way street. If you don't communicate, people think things and rumors get set away and so on. Got to be communicating all the time, but you've got to listen and you've got to take action with people. Make decisions using facts and data, but also by consensus. So I believe that is the approach that'll sort of improve the future of manufacturing in the UK and in the world, actually. Because if we're not careful, and I've seen it in some places, people are turned into robots.
Yeah.
or cyborgs. You know, they don't have an opinion. They don't have.
Yeah.
I mean, what sort of investment are them going to make in your company if that's how they are being treated? You know, it's
yeah, completely agree. Great answer. And just finally, so this question was from Don Murray. So Don Murray's the MD of Spincraft up in Newcastle. So his question was, how do you build a career? Sorry, how do you build a career path in an SME with a flat organization? So how do you build a career path in an SME with a flat organization?
That's a tough one.
Question,
it's a tough job.
Yeah.
God, I don't know. I think for me, you've got to build some credibility, haven't you? In the first sense, in that role, if the organisation's quite flat, is going in there. My approach to any role I've gone into is the first point of call is always to understand the current state. Mm-hmm. So, what and all, how are things today? What's the culture like? What's the health and safety culture like? What's our quality like? What's the metrics like? What's good? What's bad? What's indifferent? And then once you've got that set, Mark, you do that with a team. Is then where do you want to get to? Yeah. What's your future state look like? What's your desired state look like? How long will it take? And then the execution of that plan. My advice would be to start small, smart them little projects, get some of them under your belt, get that low-hanging fruit done, and then creep onto the bigger projects. That's going to get you credibility, isn't it, in that organisation? And maybe then you can build your career path when people can see what your capability is, And hey, it's a tough world, isn't it? Not everybody's going to agree with that approach. And you've resilience. You talk about the three words that make a great leader. Resilience is one of them I would use, because you have to. Yeah. I felt a little bit like a duck out of water when I went to Komatsu. I felt like I was the only one speaking in a certain way, and I had to overcome a lot of challenges there to convince people that the approach that I wanted to take was the right approach. Humility is the other word. Just to expand on that. Listening, the key. Be fair, be firm. Use data to drive decisions, but be nice to people. For all them reasons, good character. Be courageous. Take some risks. Do the things that others are not prepared to do. And finally, that resilience word. You've got to be tough. And I've been through some proper lows and some proper highs. And as we've described before, Mark, taking it as every little step as another life experience, and look back and say, I've learned from that.
Yeah, love that. Excellent. Look, Russ, this has been tremendous. We had a conversation prior to this in terms of why I do it, and to give the value added piece for young managers and just whatever in terms of experience wise. It just shows why I do this in terms of, because the advice you've been given me and everyone listening has just been unbelievable. And you know what? I think the biggest thing I've taken away from it, which I think the biggest thing most people take away from it, is that you show that whatever happens in life or your career, however good or bad you deem it, you take every situation as a positive, every situation that can somehow benefit you for your next opportunity or what happens next in life. And I think that's a very rare thing to see and a very rare outlook, but I think it's something people can really take something. I'd definitely take something from it. So it's been a real privilege to interview you. So look, really, really appreciate it, Russell, and thank you, mate. It's been great.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thanks for the opportunity.